Hi, and welcome to Blazing Bullets. Today, I want to discuss something that I've had a million people ask me, and I've seen 1,000 different videos about this, so I almost didn't want to do it, but many people ask, what caliber is the best? What's the most powerful? What should I carry? So many questions about different calibers, and there's a million different answers for this situation. It's really hard to, it's hard to pick and choose what's the best caliber. Anything that you use is obviously going to be, a deterrent. But what happens if you have some crazy fool that's on drugs or something like that, or if you're out in the wild or something like that, and you got to carry something that take down a buffalo or something like that. It all depends on your situation, your stature. What you feel comfortable with, and perhaps even how many rounds you need, sizes. There's so many determining factors in it. It's just hard to put something on one different caliber that's the best of all, or whatever. So this is a hard thing, and it's individually tailored to each person. You just can't really pick and choose. A girl that might be 100 pounds might not be able to handle a 45. A big tall fellow or something like that, he might not be able to get his fingers around a little gun. It all depends on your stature and your size and your abilities and what you feel comfortable with. But I've even suggested to people to carry a 22. Most people might laugh at a 22, but really, if you think about it, a 22 has almost no recoil. And if most magazines and most 22s will handle at least 10 rounds, you hit somebody with 10 rounds point blank, and once your aim is on, they're not going to be feeling too good with 10 22s hitting them. So you can't really laugh at a 22. Now, is it my choice of carry? No. I prefer something a little bit bigger than that, but I wouldn't laugh at anybody taking a 22. That's just not. You just can't make fun of calibers. Any caliber, I wouldn't want to get hit by a BB gun. Let's just get it that way, But we have some different guns here, and we're going to talk about each one of them and what the cons and pros and cons on each of them are. So, all right, let's get started. Alright, so which size is the best? Well, it's hard to tell. This might fit you. This is a Glock 29. This is a 10 millimeter, but I wouldn't suggest this to most any person. This is probably one of the most powerful automatics that there are. I'm not sure if most people know what a 10 millimeter looks like, but that's a 10 millimeter. It's like a 40 caliber, but it's a little bit larger. 40 would come up to about here on this, maybe up to about the bullet size there. But most 40 Smith Wessons are, for the most part, a sized down 10 millimeter. But this is a pretty large gun. It has a very large slide, and obviously to handle a powerful round, it has to have a large barrel and everything else in there. So would I suggest this to most people? Not really. But if you're confident, or you've been shooting for a long time, or if you're a large person, you might be able to handle something like this. Most girls, I wouldn't offer this to. That's a fairly large caliber, fairly large. The problem is, what I think all the time is, when you're shooting, it's the recoil. Most times, if you're shooting like this, you're on target, you got your sights on something, and then the recoil comes up, and you have to try to get that gun back on target again, and that might take a while for most people. If you're shooting a 22, there's no recoil, you just boom, 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 boom in one spot. If you have something smaller like a 25 cal, same thing, there's no recoil. The larger the size of the bullet you get, most likely the more recoil that you might have. So 10 millimeter, lots of recoil. Now this is a Smith Wesson 9mm shield, and this I suggest to many people. Any fella that wants to carry can handle this gun. It has a less than an inch slide. The recoil is very minimal. Most 9mm are. It has very nice sights. It's affordable. I believe this gun is anywhere between $400 $450, and Smith & Wesson, wonderful company. I always talk Smith & Wesson up. They do a fantastic customer service kind of company. You have a problem, you call up Smith & Wesson, they'll take care of it. Now, just so people know, as I said before, this was a 10mm, and this is a 9mm. You can see that there's quite a bit of difference in the size of that bullet. You can see that you can put many more 9mm into a gun, and don't let anybody fool you. A 9mm is a very powerful round. Not as powerful as the 10mm, but you can carry more rounds, and it has way less recoil, and you can get your sights back on target way quicker with a 9mm for most people than you can 10mm. Unless you're Michalak, who can probably get back on target lickety split with any caliber. I always suggest usually carrying a 9mm. Probably what we're going to get down to is I'm going to suggest most people probably carry the 9mm. Now, that's what I like to carry most of the time. I will carry a 45, depending on the situation. I think a 9mm, in most cases, will take care of most problems. Most of my guns, such as this is the Steyr. This is a Steyr S9A1. This has a 10-round magazine, which kind of makes me upset, because it's quite capable of carrying 12 rounds, but they got this large floor plate down here that really ticks me off. I think it was made for California, that has a 10-round magazine limit law in their Hitlerism. Like 10 rounds is going to be any better than 12 rounds, like it's going to make a difference in someone's life. It's all feel-good stuff, but I like the gun a lot. I've got several videos on this. I carry this often. This is a 9mm. This is an unloaded weapon. I always check my guns beforehand, but you can see it is an unloaded weapon. Nothing there. It's a nice weapon, but 9mm is a good carry, very good carry size. All right, next up is my cousin's 38 Special. I personally don't carry this because this was my cousin's. He's passed away, and I keep it for him. I've shot it many times. It is a 38 Special. It's a Rossi. I'm not sure about Rossi. It seems to be a well quality gun, but I'm not a real fan of revolvers. I don't know why, because they are probably the most reliable gun there is out there. Few moving parts, you know. As long as you can pull the trigger, you got it. And it has, you know, your single action, double action, positions. But when you carry a revolver, you really have to watch what you're doing, especially like an older revolver like this. If it gets caught on something, or even this has the firing pin right on the hammer. You can see it right there. It doesn't have the newer revolvers have a firing pin that's is in the frame. Most, I should say, most have in the frame. But this can actually go off if you hit it hard enough on the ground, and that hammer pushes up into the bullet. So many older fellows that used to carry a revolver would leave this round cylinder in here, would leave that empty. So then, basically, with this revolver, I mean, it's only capable of 5 shots. So if you have to leave one cylinder blank, you only got 4 shots. So better make sure you're pretty good, and they all can't. But that's one problem with these, the older revolvers, is you got to watch that hammer there, because that can set off a round just by itself. Just if it flies out of your pocket and hits the ground, hits that hammer, boom, you know, it might go off into a direction you don't want it to head off into. So, but you know, 38 Special is pretty easy to handle. It's not like a 357, even though a 357 can handle both. This is a 38 Special round, and I brought my 357 round. You can see the difference. There is a size difference. So a 357 can handle a 38 Special round, but a 38 Special cannot handle a 357 round. You shouldn't even try to get that in there, even if you could. You can see that it would be difficult to even get that in there. But it is a much more powerful round than a 357 than a 38 Special. So you don't want to put anything in there that's not caliber for that. But 38 Special, it's a decent run. I have no problems with 38 Special. That'll definitely hurt somebody, or an animal, or anybody else. And the only problem I have with it is I just don't really like revolvers too much. They're bulky, they're chunky. The barrels aren't very long, even though that, you know, as long as you're a decent shot, the size of the barrel really shouldn't make a difference. But I much prefer an automatic, or semi-automatic, I mean. But that's the 38 Special. Very powerful round, as I said, in its own right. It's not as powerful as the 357, but the 38 Special will get her done. You know, you have no problems with that. Next up is my favorite. This is my very first gun that I've ever purchased. This is a Smith Wesson 4013. It's sort of designed after the 1911. It actually has 1911 type magazines. This is a 40 caliber round. I'll put this down. I'll actually put this next to the 10 millimeter that I had out before. I believe that's a 10 millimeter. That's 10 millimeter. You can see the size difference between the 10 millimeter and the 40 caliber. This is a 40 S&W. This is a 10 millimeter. Both rounds are snappy. I think 40 S&W is a very snappy little round. It's very snappy. You should see the flames that shoot out of this, and I have a Beretta that's in 40. They just fly out of the front of this. This thing is just it's a tack driver. And Smith & Wesson really did a nice job on my trigger. It's an unloaded weapon, and with the magazine out of there, it's got a magazine disconnect. You see the hammer is back on this. This is hammer fired. Actually, hits a pin in there, so it's sort of hammer fired. I'm not sure if they would consider that being hammer fired. It does have a hammer. It's not striker fired, but it's sort of precursor to Smith & Wesson making striker fires. This was before I think they even had a striker fire out. The shield's a striker fire made by Smith & Wesson. I might be wrong about that. I'll have somebody write me in the column here saying, you know, you're wrong about that. I could be wrong about that. This actually has Hogue grips on there. I put these on a long time ago. I like the Hogue grips on there. It's better than the plastic ones that they had on there originally. But as I said, it's not a real bulky gun. It's a compact, what they consider a compact. It's not a subcompact, but it's a compact. It has a, I believe, a 3 3/4 inch barrel. Might be a 4-inch barrel. I'm not quite sure. I have to look that up. But it's snappy. You know, it's got a lot of recoil to it. So when you're shooting it, you know, unless you're good with a gun and you know what you're doing, snappiness isn't always the best thing. And don't think that, you know, I have to have the big gun. You know, I have to have a 45. 45 kills people. You know, you only need one shot with that. Well, you know, if you need 2 shots, maybe the second shot you have is, you know, when you have such a recoil or the gun flies out of your hand, you're going to get a second shot. So not all the time is a big caliber the best caliber. A lot of guys get that macho thing saying, I got to have that 45 or I got to have that, you know, 500 Magnum in my pocket because that's going to put people down. Yeah, you know, don't think that way. But this is a good gun. I've shot 30,000 rounds to this gun easily, and I had a problem with it. It's 20 years old, over 20 years old, probably about 22 years old. And I called up Smith & Wesson. They sent me a label for it. This is why I say about Smith & Wesson, you just can't beat Smith & Wesson. I called them up. This is a 22-year-old gun, and at the time it was probably a 20-year-old gun. And I said, Smith & Wesson, I got a problem with my gun. It was stovepiping. Stovepiping, for those who don't know. And I'll have to go off camera here for a minute. Put this up. A round will stick up in here like this, or it could be like sideways or different directions, but for the most part, they call it a stovepipe because it looks like this. It sticks up in the air or something like that. It was stovepiping. It was taking rounds. It was putting them in there correctly. It wasn't ejecting the rounds right. It wasn't putting the new round in correctly. So they sent me a return label and said, you know, send it to us. We'll fix it. Well, they called me up and they said they weren't sure if they could fix it or not. It said that, you know, it's kind of older, and they weren't sure if they could make it reliable or not. I said, well, it's kind of my first gun. I really like it. Well, you know, if you can fix it, I'd really appreciate it. They said, well, you know what, we'll send you a new gun. They were going to give me a brand new gun and keep this one. But I said, I'd prefer to have it back because I love it. So they had, for 3 days, they had a couple guys on it. They called me up in 3 days. And I mean, they personally called me up on the phone and said, you know, we fixed your gun for you and we're going to, you know, send it back to you. They retooled the barrel. They put, if you can see, it's pretty shiny here. They put a new extractor on it. I'm sure after 30,000 rounds, the extractor's getting worn out a little bit. And they did a trigger job on it. And this thing shoots like a dream. Unbelievable. And they send it back to me, no cost. So like I said, Smith & Wesson stands behind their products. Unlike what I could say for Beretta, where Beretta I think's the horrible company. They're horrible to work with. I had a brand new gun from Beretta, and I sent it to Beretta, and Beretta sent it back to me saying, you know, pretty much don't send it back to us again because we don't really care about your gun. I guess since they sell all the military guns, they don't care about regular people too much. I have nothing good to say about Beretta. But Smith & Wesson, they're tops. And this is a beautiful gun. I enjoyed this gun. I've had so many good times with that, and I used to carry it with me all times when I was younger and delivering pizzas and stuff. This was my carry gun. And she served me faithfully. Alright, this is my 357. This also is a Smith Wesson. This is a 686 Smith Wesson. It is a 6-round 357. It's got a 4-inch barrel. These come stainless, but me and my son, we usually polish them, which doesn't take a whole lot of time. Maybe about 6-7 hours of work on it to put some polish on there and Dremel to it and shine it up. It's got fingerprints on it now, so it doesn't look too shiny, but it's you can really shine the heck out of this thing. When I say carry this, and you can see that it's unloaded, it's a pretty big gun, and it's snappy as heck. 357s are snappy. It's a 38 special, but it's a Magnum, so it's a 357 version of the 38 special Magnum. It's a snappy gun. With 357s in it, it has a good recoil to it. With 38 specials in it, not so much. Like I said, you can shoot 38 specials out of a 357, but you can't shoot 357s out of a 38 special. All it has to do with the chambering and the specs that barrel is made for. This is a big gun. Would I suggest carrying that? Well, probably not. That's a pretty big gun to carry. But if you're a big person, you might be able to carry that. But would I suggest that to most people? Not really. They do make snubbies for that. A 2-inch barrel, on a snubby. But you're talking about serious recoil then. The more weight you have, the less recoil you have. When this gun is coming up, the more weight you have straight out forward, the less the recoil. When you have a little gun with a little barrel on it, you're going to have less weight and a lot more recoil coming off of it. It's all about the second shot to me. I personally think the second shot, third shot, fourth shot, if you can get those second, fourth, fifth, 10th shot on target, that means the world will difference. So, like I said, certain calibers have certain specifications for each one, and not everything's the same. So you have to know your limitations and your strengths, your weaknesses, and especially in the summertime. Imagine trying to hide something like this in the summertime with shorts on and stuff, and you're not going to be able to do it. Everybody's going to say, you got a gun with you, because you'll be printing like hex with that. So yeah, 357, especially that size, I wouldn't suggest anyone carrying anything like that size. But to each his own. I mean, if that's what you can do, and you're a big, tall, 6'8" person, hey, you might be able to handle that recoil, and it might just melt away in your body because you've got such a big body stature.